Hi, you're welcome to Script to Story, a 6-week podcast series about translators and their craft. And today we have Yifei Yang, and Yifei Yang is the woman who translated COVID Monster's visit to Chinese. Yifei, you're very welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yifei, Happy Chinese New Year.
Yeah, happy Chinese New Year to you and to everyone.
And tell us this year, which animal is represented in this year's Chinese New Year?
I think this year will be the year of the bull, and yeah, it's I think the bull is a very important animal in our culture because for a long time China has a very lasting agricultural culture, and usually if you are a farmer, you will have some bulls, and they will help you work, help you those bulls. They are very hardworking animals, and they are very very loyal to the farmer. And I remember my mom used to say she has a favorite bull, and the ball will follow her everywhere, and when the ball was going to die, it will actually cry for the master. You can really feel this deep friendship and connection with the ball. So yeah, there are a lot of beautiful stories about the the friendship between bulls and their farmers. Yeah, it's just a very important animal in our culture.
You can see that even in Ireland is the horse. It's often the horse, but any farmer that spends time with their animal, and it's a good, loyal animal, it's a hardworking animal, and they have given so much to the farmer. There is a very strong connection. When they die, they both grieve the animal and the farmer. So yeah, we are connected very strongly to our animals, those that we really need to survive and to thrive in our work. So yeah, so this is the year of the bull. So loyalty, hard work ethic, good year. It's a good year. It's a good year. So ahead for the Chinese people and maybe the whole world. Please God, if 2021, the vaccines, everything else happens, good things happen. So Yifei, how do you celebrate Chinese New Year in China? I know we at the moment it's probably virtual events, because in Ireland it will be virtual. And what is it like in China traditionally? What would you have done in the past and what's done today?
Yeah, traditionally it will be a very long celebration. I remember when I was a child, they will even spend the whole month just doing all the preparations and just enjoying the atmosphere, something like that. And you spend a lot of time just looking forward to the new year. But I think as time goes by, nowadays young people, they are not so interested in this anymore. I mean, they still want to celebrate it. It's still important for the family to gather together and have all those nice meals. They still do that, but they probably will only spend a week to do so. So usually the day before the new year, which is New Year's Eve, it's a tradition for all the family to gather together wherever they were before. They should buy a ticket to be home, and usually there will be a national very serious traffic jam all over, because all the Chinese people are just trying to get home at that day. Yeah, so usually at the New Year's Eve, they will prepare very very good meals together and just spend the night together, reunite. Yeah.
That sounds beautiful. It's like I suppose Thanksgiving in the US or Christmas in Ireland. So Chinese
more
New
like Christmas. Yeah.
Chinese New Year is as special as that. Oh, that's fantastic. That's a nice thing to hear. I didn't know that, and it's wonderful to hear that, you know. Well, we better get on to talking about this book.
You mean about the traffic jam?
No, about the unity, about coming home, the importance of it, and being with family. I think that's really important, and being where you were born, you know. I think that's a nice thing that we do in Ireland at Christmas time, and I think they do in the US predominantly at Thanksgiving, you know, and Canada as well for Thanksgiving. We better get on to talking about the book. So, COVID Monster's Visit was translated by you from English to Chinese. Now, I know that this had to have been difficult because it's a rhyming story. And a rhyming story, by its nature, any rhyme is very difficult to translate from one language to another. So you translated it from English to Chinese. How was that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. The rhyming was the most challenging part, but also the most beautiful part, I would say. Because back in China, I wrote poems,
Oh,
so I have always been like paying attention to the rhythm, the music of the language. So even though like English is not my native language, like when I read the original script, I can see there's music going on there, and I would like to present it in Chinese in a very natural way because and the challenging part is that like I can see like in English maybe for example a whole page and they will try to have the same like the one rhythm like the one rhyme here, but in Chinese it's very hard to keep the same. Like maybe
yeah,
you have to compromise by changing it into two rhymes and you have to make the the shift very smooth so that it does not sound very awkward. Yeah, that would really be the most challenging part, but that's also the fun part because I
and
guess I just like to.
yeah, and there's the difference between a person who translates and a translator, because a person who translates can translate something to another language, but it doesn't have the emotion or the lyrical sound of the other language. Where a true translator loves their art and they carry the rhythm of the original into their mother tongue. And so it's fantastic to hear you talk about it in that way, because that's the as you speak, it's the language of a true translator, that they love to get the essence of what they're reading in another language and translate it to their mother tongue. So thank you for telling us that, because that is the art of it. And it's really important for people to know that there's a big difference between Google Translate and the actual art or skill of translation. So different. So it's wonderful to hear that. What I know that when you aimed, because there's so many dialects in China, as there are so many dialects in Ireland, and it's only a fraction of the size in the Irish language, you know.
Mhm.
So your aim was to write this book in a standardized Chinese. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And what was the reason for that for you? What was the main reason?
Well, the reason for that is I think like the standard Mandarin is something works something like the RP in the UK. It's just what everyone would say, and also because like I come from Sichuan province, so usually in my life I will speak with my dialect,
Yeah.
but because I studied in Beijing for 7 years, I studied literature, I studied Chinese language there, so it's kind of I know what the standardized Mandarin should be
Mm.
written and should be said, and I know that's the correct way.
And I noticed in the Irish language there's an official Kaijon or official standard that that there's that they're trying to introduce to the language, so that the purity of the language isn't lost, because sometimes a dialect can lose something grammatically. And for you to go from a strong dialect into standardized Mandarin, that must have been quite the challenge. It must have been quite the challenge.
I wouldn't really say that's a really big challenge because for most Chinese people, it's like they grew up with a local dialect, but when they enter school, they just learn the standardized Mandarin. And so I think most of us will naturally have like I wouldn't really call it two languages because sometimes it's just a different accent, the
Yeah.
different choice of words, or it's informal or formal. So for us, it's like two systems. You when you are back home, you speak your dialect, but the dialect don't really have a very systemed like written system. But standard Mandarin will have that
Mm.
written language. So mostly in books, you will read standardized Mandarin, but it's no problem for us to speak in our dialect.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, so the Chinese version or the Mandarin, standard Mandarin version of COVID Monsters Visit, um, what was your favorite part, or what was the most difficult part, whichever part you want to talk about? What did you like about the book? We need to tell people a little bit about the book. So what did you like
Yeah.
about it?
Let me just start with the most difficult part because
Okay.
most people maybe would not imagine that actually the most difficult part is the title, like COVID Monsters Visit. The title is the hardest part. I discussed with your team to because I can't decide which name should I use because COVID, like in English, it just carries two meaning. It could be, refers to the virus, but it also refers to, it can be a name. Yeah. So I get that, but in Chinese, you really cannot use like COVID as a name. So for me, it's I should either choose to keep the meaning of the virus or just to translate it in the name. But then if it's a name, people maybe won't instantly get that you are referring to this virus in a smart way. So I think in the end, our conclusion was to use the virus as the main meaning. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's sad that actually in this translation, um, it's not a name anymore. Like COVID cannot be used as a name anymore. But still, I think we kept the most important part because we just want to refer to the virus, just want to refer to this special
Because
time.
we want to say that we're doing our best to help really young children not feel afraid, to know that there are
Yeah.
certain things you have to do in a child-friendly way to explain it to them is important. So I'll read a piece in English. I don't know if you have the Chinese translated version in front of you, but I'll read a small piece in English. So this is just one page. Daddy came home and took off his shoes and coat and washed his hands beside the picture of the big goat. He washed, and when he was done, he smiled at me and said, "We'll have fun." So it was kind of, we're trying to give the impression, we're trying to tell children it's really important to wash your hands. So we're bringing that into it. And then there was another time I promised my daddy I wouldn't touch a thing, and when we went outside, daddy brought a long stick. This is how far we need to be from each other, and this is how far we need to pass one another. I looked at the stick. It was taller than me by more than a half. And when Mammy held my hand, I thought that was daft. No, 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 Mammy said. You must hold my hand, and when someone strides, we'll step to one side. We don't want Squishy to get on our clothes or even up our nose. So wave them by and stay well apart, for we don't want to walk on Squishy. That's smart. Now, so in a sense, we are saying to the children, I mightn't have read it the best there, but in a sense, we're saying to the children, it's important to wash your hands. It's important to stay away from people, and we're doing it in a child-friendly way. And the other piece, I thought, the illustration really depicted it well in terms of we're having fun with Mammy and Daddy. It's not a scary thing, you know. And the other thing I've also noticed about it, because I've spoken to a number of translators now, Yifei, and they said there's some words here that they don't exist, like the word daft doesn't exist in French, doesn't exist in Estonian. I have yet to speak to the German translator, but there are certain words that just don't exist in another language. And did you come across those things? Did you find that in the book? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of them. And I think because like for French or Germany, like they are still like European languages, but Chinese, it's a whole new different, language
Yeah.
root. It's coming from a different language tree, something like that. So like, yeah, just like I said, what's hard about keeping the rhyme is that in Chinese, sometimes if you want to translate, like maybe the sentence order in English is like this, then I have to totally change the sentence order. So just I have to rephrase it and also try to find a rhyme at the end of the sentence. So yeah, there are a lot of words that don't exist in Chinese, and there are also a lot of activities that don't exist in Chinese culture, or it does not carry the same meaning, just like drinking tea or just some small details like that. But I still kept those details because for Chinese children, we kind of grew up reading a lot of fairy tales. A lot of them really come from the Western world. So it won't be that difficult for them to understand what it is. But what I can do is just to keep the originality of the language, because for them, they are reading it to still learn the Chinese language. They are still absorbing like the language itself. So yes, it's all about the language, I guess.
And that's interesting. You're talking about language and Chinese coming from a different language tree than European languages, you know, and we can see that because the symbolism in the language, in the writing, is so vastly different to what you see in European language. Um, and I'm just wondering, how difficult was it for you to learn English? Because when you look at I look at Chinese, or as you're speaking standard Mandarin in the book, and I think, wow, I'd love to know how to write this, and I'd love to know how to read it because it looks so artistic. The symbols, each symbol looks like it takes, I can't, I don't know when you start to write, but it must take you a long time to get those symbols as a little child, you know, to get them just right. And there's such artistic expression in it. But I'm also conscious that there's such an enormous amount of work in each symbol, you know, in each letter, in each word that you want to put together. How was it for you then, learning as a child, young child, learning how to write Chinese, but also then learning how to read and write English, because there's such vastly different language trees. The Chinese language is so artistic when you draw it as a child and you learn how to do it the first time you're learning how to write. How long does it take a Chinese child to learn that? And how difficult then was it for you to learn English?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and that's relevant for a lot of people because, you know, a lot of people are trying to learn Chinese. Also, a lot of Chinese people are trying to learn English well. So yeah, it's very challenging. I think what's interesting about the Chinese language is that, you know, like I think every language starts with a sound. So when you are a child, you are familiar with Chinese as the sound. I mean, you can speak it, but you cannot write it. And most children, like when they enter primary school at 5 or 6 or 7, they really start to learn how to write. And I think that's the most fascinating about the Chinese the language is that each character works. I think it's like a puzzle because, you know, like each character, it's like a drawing. It's like a little picture that carries meaning, but still it has its sound, its implications. But when you put them together, you can actually create new words. Yeah. So for me, Chinese really works like puzzles. You're just playing with puzzles and playing with different associations, different connections. So I would say it's a very creative and flexible language because the unit is really like characters.
As a person who's never um, read never learned the language, you see that in the writing. It's the characters and the creativity, and it's nice to know that it's like a puzzle for you. So that for a child, that must be so exciting in some ways, but difficult as well. But it's exciting to get the next part of that puzzle.
Yeah, it's actually fun when you are learning how to write Chinese characters because like usually a good Chinese teacher they will tell you like you know how this picture evolved throughout history. Maybe at the very beginning when this character was first invented, it's a very um obvious picture. For example, like the sun, it really just a circle with, it really looks like a sun. But as time goes by, like it just develops into a more not so obvious way. But if you really trace back the history, it's not that difficult. You can definitely understand what those ancient Chinese people were drawing, what they really wanted to say. Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear that, because it's wonderful to learn about another language, and it's wonderful to see it then, the Cobalt Monster's visit being translated from English to Chinese, and to see that as it's actually a source of great pride for us here at Tribes Press, because now we have not just Cobalt Monster in like the standard European languages, but we've also crept into another language tree, and
Another tree. Yeah.
and it has found its way onto the pages of this book. Thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us here at Tribes Press. We love you being part of this team, and we love we love to hear about. I have enjoyed thoroughly hearing about your passion for literature and your joy of translation, and it's your words speak the language of a true translator. You know, you have the essence of it, you have the love of translation. Thank you so much for being part of this journey with COVID Monsters Visit. And I look forward, hopefully, to speaking to you again. But in the meantime, have a happy Chinese New Year. I know the celebrations are quite virtual this year, but I hope you can celebrate it in some beautiful way too. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy Chinese New Year to everyone.